On its most basic level, text is vector information. Vector versus raster. What's the difference between the two? What does raster mean? Just a bunch of pixels, just a bunch of squares. Vector information, though, has a little bit more information to it. Let's say you're doing a business card or a logo for a company, and you decide that a good logo would be just a round circle. If you did it raster-based, if you did it as pixels, and let's say it's going to go on the business card, it's going to be a ½ an inch high, and you do it as pixels, it would look great on the business card. Let's say you do it at, 300 pixels per inch. Just take my little marquee tool here. Great. Fill that with some black pixels there. All right. Looks pretty good. But then the company's going to go down south, and they're doing this big trade show, and there's a convention hall, and they're going to put a banner on the side of the hall where it's going to be printed 20 feet high. Well, if that's only a ½ an inch high at 300 pixels per inch, how many pixels high is that? Half of 300? 150 pixels. And if you print that 20 feet high, what's it going to look like? Yeah, probably not very good. Whereas if you use, say, the pen tool or any vector means of making a circle, you could have a little mathematical statement that says, start here, curve around with a radius of a ½ of an inch until you get back to where you started, and there's your ½ inch high circle. But when they print it full size on the convention hall floor, it'll say, well, start here, you just change the math, curve around with a radius of 10 feet until you come back to where you started, and there's your circle with a 20-foot diameter. Nice, sharp, crisp edges. And that's the cool thing about this vector. It's always going to be nice and sharp and crisp. Type is also vector. So if I were to throw some text onto here, let's say I did text. There we go. Okay, and that's green text. Let's make that black text. There we go. So in theory, if I zoom in, I shouldn't see any pixels, right? So let's go in and take a look. Oh, wait a minute. I do see pixels in there. If this is vector, why am I seeing pixels on that? This document is raster, isn't it? I made a new document. It was 8.5 by 11 at 300 pixels per inch. So when I zoom in close enough, I'll see pixels on this. This is a raster version, a rasterized version of the text, but you can see on this layer here, big capital T, it is still actual text. I could change it if I needed to. I could change the font. If I click up here, I can use the up and down arrow keys to try a whole bunch of different fonts. So maybe I'm doing my logo and I don't know what font I want. Just click on the type layer, click up in the fonty thing up in the top left corner there, and I can use those arrow keys to try a bunch of different fonts because it's still vector. There could be times where you have to what's called rasterize the type. Maybe there's like some kind of a filter you need to apply to it. Just be careful when you're rasterizing type. There's a few bad things that can happen with that. I'm just going to make a quick copy of the text here. And let's say I rasterized this, but just this top one here, that one on top. I'm going to convert it into pixels. Right click, rasterize type. And if I were to scale both of these around, do a Command T, let's say I scale them down. Maybe it's just like the little copyright thing underneath one of the photographs there. Which one's going to hold up better? Well, if I zoom in, they both did pretty good. When you're scaling down, it's throwing information away, so you kind of had too much to begin with. So overall, they both did pretty good. The top one didn't hold up quite as well. We're kind of getting a little bit of some fadedness on the top of the E there. The real problem, though, comes when you try to scale it up. Let's say I wanted this to be a big background element behind my image. Scale that up, and how did it work? Oh, the bottom one held up pretty good. The top one kind of disintegrated. And this one down here, I could still change the type if I needed to. This one, no. All it had was the original pixels were there. I've scaled it up. You can see that it's no longer type anymore. You can see the actual letters of the text. Bad things have happened to it. All right, so for as much as you can keep that vector just to maximize your versatility. You can change fonts, things like that. When you send it out to be printed, let's say you're sending it to a magazine or you're having some business cards made, make sure the vector information goes with it. If you flatten it down and you send it as raster, well, remember last week we were talking about moire and we were talking about half-toning. If you zoom in on a photograph, in CMYK, it has to convert it down to little dots of color. So cyan, magenta, yellow, and black dots, cool. But what would happen if you did that to text? I mean, if you just had a flattened version, you sent that in, the text itself would also have to get half-toned. And if it's fairly large type, like a poster with a great big headline across the top, it's probably not that big of a deal if it gets half-toned, but it will have to get half-toned if they don't have the vector information. And for small type, that halftoning might actually kind of get halftoned into illegibility. So be careful of your type. Keep it vector. And when you send the file, when you send that layered PSD file to the client, you should probably include the font. Anybody know where the fonts are stored on their computers? It's in a folder called Fonts. Yes. Let me show you where the fonts folder is on my computer. And you may think that's pretty obvious. And if I go back to my Macintosh HD here, remember we got the applications, the library, folders, systems, users. There's my user. The directory structure, very important to remember. And the fonts are in this system folder. Here's library. Here's all my little color sync profiles. You know, when you profile your monitor, you'll make color sync profiles. And here are my fonts. So let's say in my ad, I had used the font, let's say I'd used that Space Age font. This is one that I found on defont.com Space Age. So if I was going to send this file, I want to make sure that vector information goes with it. So I look through my fonts folder, and under SP, FT, it's not there. Why would the font not be there? Oh, in your hard drive, like here's my Macintosh HD hard drive. There's my system folder. Here's my user. Here's my like this user's folder. There's my personal user. There's a fonts folder in here, which is where the user level fonts are stored. And you're like, no, there isn't. Yes, there is, but it's invisible. There's a lot of invisible folders on your computer. They made them invisible a while ago. Like if you went into your Macintosh HD on an older version of Mac OS X, you would see a whole bunch of folders in here. But a lot of them had stuff that if you messed around with it, it could do very, very bad things to your computer. So they made them invisible. If you want to make your invisible folders visible, Command-Shift period will temporarily make all your invisible folders visible. So remember before I had applications, library, system, and users? Look at all these folders in here that have all kinds of things in them that if I threw one out could possibly damage my operating system beyond repair. So they make them invisible. And in your users folder, in my Greg Dambruck, remember I said there was a fonts folder. There's my library and fonts. And these are the fonts that I've installed into my user folder. So there's that Space Age font. So I would save up the PSD file, and then I would take that Space Age font, I would put that in the same folder. That way, if the person who's doing the output doesn't have that font, they can install it on their machine, and they can use the vector information to output it. And I have an example here of where I found some type that had been half-toned. This is in the Toronto Star a few years back, and fortunately, I had with me the macro lens on my phone, so I was able to take a real close photograph of the vector version, and look at how nice and sharp those outlines are. Very good. So that went in with all the vector information. Then there was an ad beside it where the type had a slightly soft look to it. And sure enough, when I looked in really close, that type had been half-toned. So when they sent this, they probably flattened it down. Their graphic designer sent it probably as like a JPEG, maybe as a TIFF, but it didn't have the vector information, and it got half-toned. So you do want to make sure that that font goes with it. Seems like kind of a pain having to make invisible folders visible just to find your fonts, which is why when they made those things invisible, they also gave you a new program. If you look in your Others folder under Applications, you will find something called Font Book, which is where you can organize all of your fonts. Say somebody sent you a font and you wanted to install it, you can just double click it, it'll launch Font Book and it'll install it into your user. If you go to all fonts, you'll see fonts that are in both the system folder and your library in your user folder. These are just the ones that were in my user folder, and there's that Space Age. From here, I could file, export, I could throw that into the same folder, so you can export fonts from Font Book as well. Font Book actually has some other neat capabilities, which they've also recently added to Photoshop. But let's say you wanted to see all the different characters that were available in Arial. You'll notice in this week's folder, I included something called Alphabet, which has all the lowercase, all the uppercase, and all the letters and the numbers with the Option key on it. So if you held down Option G, you would get a copyright symbol. But there's far more glyphs, far more individual characters in a font than you see right here. Some of them you can only get to using an international keyboard. And Font Book will actually let you see all the characters that are there. Normally your font book will be set to view sample. So you'll see a sample of there's the uppercase, there's the lowercase. Oh, this one also has some italics versions. Oh, it also has some bold versions. Very cool. But if you want to see everything that's in here, you can view the repertoire. And if you scroll through, you'll see every variation, every language, every keyboard. So instead of having to switch your keyboard to another language, you can just select it in here, copy it, and paste it. Awesome. But like I said, they recently introduced something in Photoshop that lets you do something fairly similar. Under the Window menu, you can go to your Glyphs panel. And this will show you all the different glyphs that are in your selected font. So you can simply select one of the glyphs from in there. Glyph just means that individual character, that individual shape. So if you think it's an unusual font you've got, maybe you got it from like defont.com, include the font when you send it out to the client.